Welcome back, it's me Lou, and I'm here for another action figure unboxing and review. And today we are looking at this, the Marvel Select Loki. So I purchased this from the Disney store. It's located in my mall. And it always seems like with the Disney store, they always kind of time the releases of some of their merchandise in correlation if there's a new movie or TV show coming out. And as of right now, it's May 29th, 2021. And the new Loki miniseries is going to be debuting on Disney+. So it only makes sense that I'd find this on the shelves. And I'm pretty excited about it. But if you're unfamiliar with this version of Loki, this is not the MCU Tom Hiddleston Loki. This is kind of like Loki's appearance, how he looked in the comic books, maybe the last, I don't know, say maybe 4 or 5 years. Or at least this is one of the iterations of Loki from the last 4 or 5 years. And what we get here is we have comic book inspired Loki and we have Kid Loki. This is a Marvel Select figure, so it's larger than the Marvel Legends. These normally stand around 7 inches tall, where the Marvel Legends stand about 6 inches. And they're cool. If you're familiar with the Marvel Select stuff, I've said this before, they feel more like display pieces than actual action figures that you could play with. They have all the articulation that you'd come to expect. It's very comparable to Marvel Legends, but the range of movement, and sometimes it's not as far reaching as the Marvel Legends, but they almost have just as much articulation. I feel that the detail is normally better than a Marvel Legend. They're casted in a different plastic. It seems like a little bit harder, more rigid plastic. So the sculpting the details a little bit deeper. You get a lot of really detailed cuts, and the paint applications, I don't know. So everything about these are always just really beautiful. But if you're expecting something that's going to be great for fig photography, if you want something that could do a million poses and have the figure look like he's jumping over a car or doing MMA holds, you're not going to get that out of this figure. These feel like they more like display pieces. But don't let that hinder you from buying them. They're awesome. They're a little bit more pricier than Marvel Legends too. I believe I paid $29 for this, $41 in Canada. Whereas the Marvel Legends nowadays they're on $19 to $24. But these are awesome. The Marvel Select stuff, you normally get a lot of accessories, and everything about it just feels premium in quality. You could kind of fudge these into your Marvel Legends figures, but they're a little bit taller. But if you don't mind, go ahead and get these, because I believe there is not a Marvel Legends iteration of this version of Loki. To the best of my knowledge, there was the recent comic book inspired Loki. I think that was with the Build-A-Hulk figure. And we've gotten a bunch of, I think maybe 3 or 4 versions of the Marvel Cinematic Universe Loki. But I don't think Marvel Legends ever gave us this version of the comic book inspired one. And I know for a fact they didn't give us Kid Loki yet. And for me, that was one of the big reasons why I wanted to purchase this, because I really wanted Kid Loki. Okay, let's take a look at the package. First off, this comes in your usual Marvel Select card. And if you've handled these, these are giant. This box alone feels like it's 3 or 4 times the size of your standard Marvel Legends. There's a lot of wasted space, but everything is here for a reason. Even if you just collected this mint on card, it feels like a display piece. The window does a great job of framing the characters and the accessories. Along the side, you get the title of the character. It's Loki. You get the Disney stamp. On the spine, you get some artwork from the comic book. And on the back, we looked at it earlier. It's kind of cool. There's some comic book artwork in the background. Photograph of the figures. And it's as nice as the photography is, I think it's kind of a waste of space. I say this all the time. I think, anytime you get an action figure, it'd be cool if on the back they actually gave you a bio. Like maybe a file card or just something, so you know, it kind of debriefs you on, you know, this history of the character, especially within the Marvel universe. There's so many different versions of these characters. It'd be nice if you're a kid, you look at this. If you really know the Avengers movie, you can like that. You know, you're gonna be like, oh, that's not Loki. That's something weird. But if it informs you as to what this is, you know, it might pique your interest. Maybe you actually want to pick up the comic book. So this is Loki and then Kid Loki. And Loki has a very storied and confusing history. And we'll go into a little bit of that. But for right now, let's take this guy out. Now, this is one of those things where it kills me to open it because I collect Marvel. I do collect some of the Marvel Select stuff, but a lot of it I like to keep on card and in the package. But this guy I really want out. And we have our Marvel Select catalog. We can take a look at this real quick. So these are some of the Marvel Select figures that are available or should be available at your Disney store, or I think even at the theme parks. Their availability might be kind of limited, and some of these are actually really hard to find. Alright, so there's Carnage, there's Endgame Thanos. I have that on card. It's a beautiful figure. I like it so much more than the Marvel Legends one, just because the detail, it looks more detailed. I think the paint's better. And you could fudge it into your Marvel Legends line, just because it's Thanos is so big here. The only thing is, it's like I said, even though it has all the articulation, the range of movement is kind of hindered. We have Endgame Hulk, and I want to say I think there's two versions of Endgame Hulk in the Marvel Select line. I think there's this costume, and I think there's another one where it comes with a nano gauntlet. I think that might be a different uniform altogether. We have Taskmaster. My Disney store, they're stocked up on so many of these. I mean, because the Black Widow movie should have came out, but it never did. And they just have a stock of this. That's all I see is this Taskmaster. It makes me crazy. And I'm kind of lean. I kind of want to get them, but I just can't pull the trigger on them right now. I don't know. I might sometime. And here's Cinematic Universe Taskmaster. This is the one I want. This looks awesome. I have the Marvel Legends one, and it's cool, but I kind of want the Marvel Select thing. This is a big figure. This is like a baby. I got this secondhand. I love it. It weighs a ton. It's giant. Captain Marvel. This is also based off the movie design. The Sandman's awesome. Now this is a figure I saw at my store and I passed up on it. I kept on telling myself I'll buy this later, I'll buy it later, and now it's no longer there, and I kind of wish I did get it. I love the sand effect here, and he just looks cool. The Hulkbuster, I'm on the fence. I haven't seen him at my store, but I've seen him online, and I kind of want to get him, but it's more of the comic book inspired Hulkbuster, which I don't mind, but one thing that bothers me is that the one hand here, the fingers aren't articulated, so it's constantly in that splayed out kind of like pose, and I don't like that. I kind of wish they'd just give me like two fists, or maybe an alternate hand, but I believe they don't. There's Psylocke. She's okay. Some of the comic book inspired figures, this might be an older figure too, especially the female ones, their bodies they're not articulated as well, and they don't seem to stand very well also. I have Emma Frost and Storm, and they're nice to have, but I kind of felt like I should have just left those in the package, because once you take them out, they don't have, the wow factor's kind of gone. And it's nice though, because you got like a diorama piece, and you can put them all together and make like the danger room, but I don't know. This is a figure I really want. I want the Immortal Hulk. I love all the Marvel Select Hulks. They're just like the Thing. These things are always giant. They're very beefy. You really feel like you're getting your money's worth. And I just want this. I think that's a great comic-inspired Hulk, and it's awesome. We have Spectacular Spider-Man. Now, these figures are nice, but this is where, you know, the Marvel Legend is a completely better figure than this. Like, the sculpting on this is amazing. The detail is amazing, but you're not going to be able to get in the same kind of pose that you will in Marvel Legends Spider-Man. I had to take a swig of water. Like I said before, I'm like losing my voice because I shoot so many videos. There's Mighty Thor. This is a cool Thor figure. I kind of want it. I'd get it if I saw it, but haven't seen it. I don't want it enough that I'm gonna hunt it down online. But if I could find it for a good price, I might pull the trigger on it. It's not necessarily my ideal version of Thor, but I just think this is a decent looking figure. Alright, moving on to the main event, we have Loki and Kid Loki. First impressions of the action figure while it's still in its tray. It's beautiful. I love the scale mail on his torso. The sculpting is really nice and crisp, and there's this really cool kind of like metallic coral green. It looks really awesome. They give us two different options for sleeves. Like on this one, the coat sleeves on this one they're kind of tattered at the cuffs, whereas this one's a little bit more cleaner. So if you want to make Loki look a little bit more slick and I don't know, like maybe he's going out somewhere nice, you can give him these sleeves. If you want to make him look kind of like scraggly, give him keep these. He has one of his daggers. In the movies, they get, Loki's known as having two daggers. I'm not sure how it is in the comic books, but, there's one dagger here. He has a sword. He has the staff. And then we have Kid Loki. This is what I really want. Kid Loki's awesome. Okay, let's take out Loki. I don't know why they put so many of these ties in here. It seems like the one tie is enough, and then the package by itself kind of is like anti-theft deterrent because there's so much to go through. So this just seems like a waste and a hassle with like a dozen ties to hold a figure down. Alright, one thing that bothers me with my Loki is I should have looked at this closer, but his horns, one of the horns is kind of glued a little crooked. I didn't really catch that because when the figure was packaged on the tray, his head's kind of tilted. But I could kind of live with that. It's harder plastic too, so it feels like you have to kind of be, not necessarily be gentle with it, but this isn't a figure you just want to throw into a bin because these might snap off. Let's get Kid Loki out. Take a look at that. Alright, so Kid Loki just has the one tie. It's not like... The one thing I noticed about Kid Loki too is Kid Loki, so for some of these Marvel Select things, they might come with like an additional figure like this one, but normally the figures are just kind of like mini statues that aren't articulated, and I think that's the case with this. But I don't mind at all. I'm just kind of stoked to have like some sort of actual physical representation of Kid Loki. Now, what's nice too is don't miss this. I almost did. At the bottom of near the bottom of the tray, there's actually a clear stand. So Kid Loki, he actually has sockets in his feet, and then there's he has a figure stand, and it allows him to stand up. I'm sure he could probably stand without it, but this just helps. All right, let's examine the figure a little bit more closely. So yeah, this isn't the Tom Hiddleston Loki. This is not the character from the movies. This is actually a very comic book inspired Loki. This is kind of his look from maybe the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years. I'm very familiar with this look just because it reminds me of his appearance in his own comic. It was called Loki, Agent of Asgard, and I'll show you an issue of that in a little bit. But oh, that's nice. So he has a sheath here. Let me go grab his knife real quick. While we're at it, let's just get the rest of the accessories out. Alright, I don't want to get the arms confused either, so I'm going to put the left one here and the right one here. Okay, so he has a sheath here, and here's a knife. You can easily just slide that in. I don't think there's any wrong way to do it. Alright, that's cool. It's nice that it actually fits. Like, there was a G.I. Joe, like the G.I. Joe Classified Snake Eyes. If you got the first version of it, I'm not sure if they ever corrected it, but he came with a knife, and then the sheath, you put the knife in there, it wouldn't go in all the way. It just like stick out like that. And I remember I had to take like I think like a paper clip or something. I had to like kind of like dig it out so I get it to be a little bit deeper. But this one, there's no issues like that. The knife fits perfectly in the sheath, and it's a nice snug fit. It's not going to fall out. The head is sculpted beautifully. As I said, it looks like this horn here was kind of crooked when it was glued on. He has some hair bangs that kind of go over his little headpiece, which is a nice touch. The sculpting on his face is awesome. It's a great look for him. He has the fur collar or lapel on his coat. His shoulder pads, they're gold with some metallic yellow trim. And there's a kind of like this like ornate decorative like carvings into it, which looks really nice. I love the scale mail. It's sculpted beautifully, really nice detail. I think there's some. It looks like it's cut here, so there should be some sort of mid torso movement. There is movement here. You kind of rotate it and a little bit of a crunch, but the thing is, his coat is made of a very, very stiff plastic that doesn't have any give to it. It doesn't really bend all that well. And that's kind of like, you know, it's like I said before, these are more display pieces. These aren't necessarily like action figures like a Marvel Legends. I think he has some, does he have waist? No, there doesn't look like there's waist swivel. If there is, mine might just be a little tight. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's waist swivel. It kind of looks like there should be, because it's cut. Right here, there's a waistline and it's cut, but either mine's stuck or it does move. It's just very stiff. The belt's not glued on, I don't believe. It kind of floats up a little. Let me adjust that. All right. So his arm articulation's all there. You know, you have what you normally come to expect from some of these figures. You have the bicep swivel. The arms can rotate up and down. He has single jointed elbows. The one thing I hate about some of these figures too, God, some of these figures, I'm always so, like, you pay a lot for them, and then something as simple as bending an elbow, they could cause them to break. Just because you're never sure of the quality of the plastic. You know, it's like I mentioned before, I have really bad luck with action figures. It seems like one in every like 4 or 5 figures I buy, there's some sort of weird defect with it. For his legs, it's that weird kind of like leg articulation where it's cut at the upper thigh, so it provides you to kick out. And then, but when you do, it kind of breaks the leg and it looks kind of funky like that. And then the thigh cut's right above the knee. It's not towards the top like a Marvel Legends. But he has all the articulation you come to expect. Double jointed knees. His ankles are articulated also. For me though, this is really just more of a display piece. You know, I'm not gonna like throw this in like super crazy poses. I kind of wish the belt keeps on wanting to ride up. And I'm trying to get it to like just stay down. This is a great look for Loki. For me, this is, I think, my favorite look. Whoops. Alright, so I'm trying to see how easy it is to swap out the arms. As you can see, the peg they give here, there's a couple of ridges, so they kind of lock into place once they're in. It didn't seem too difficult taking it out. So I was about to swap the arms out because I kind of wanted the cleaner cuffs. I didn't want the tears. But now that I'm looking at it, I actually prefer the stock arms they give you just because there's more ornate detail on the forearm. If you look here, the forearm, there's really nothing going on. It looks like it's a shorter sleeve too, so you'll see more of his strapped gauntlet. But what I like about the stock arm is that it has this cool pattern with a gold trim, and then there's like a kind of like slight green armor plating on it. And whereas this one, there's no armor plating at all. And I actually kind of prefer this, so I'm going to put this back on. And if you're curious what it looks like underneath, this gold armor. And then there's the socket. Here's this. It snaps into place. He has his sword. It fits into his hand nicely. It'd been cool if they gave you a sheath for his sword, but we don't get that. And then his staff. Now, I can't remember. I think it's just a movie thing, but I don't think in the comic books that his staff has like an infinity gem in it. I think it's just, you know, this is staff. And I'm sure if you want to, you could easily give this staff to your Marvel Legends Loki. Looks great. Alright, so let's do one last final pass over this figure before we move to Kid Loki. So, yeah, everything about this is a great figure. Nice head sculpt. I like the shoulder detail. It's kind of cool that he has this armor plating. And then they go that extra mile and kind of like scribe some details and patterns into it. The paint application is beautiful. There's a nice wash. It really brings out the details. The plastic... this plastic's kind of covered in a little bit of fuzz. I'm not sure if this was like something that was like sitting in a warehouse for a while before they assembled it. But the wash is really nice. It really brings out the folds and wrinkles. I wish I'd see more of that in action figures. In the 90s, that was a big deal. 90s and 2000s, it's like every figure, especially the Toy Biz stuff, they'd wash the hell out of them. I don't mind that they only give me one pair of hands. It seems like I'm so used to that companies always giving me extra pair of hands. But I don't mind. I mean, you know, you have the one hand out. This looks like some sort of like, you know, gesture. Like, you know, maybe he's putting a spell or he's, I don't know, giving his monologue. And then he has the C grip for holding the weapons. The buckle in the sheath is great. It's like I said, my only problem with this is that it seems like it keeps on riding up because of the coat. The way the coat's designed, it doesn't want it, keeps pushing the belt up. But I can live with that. He has more of that awesome scale mail on his upper thigh, on the outside. A couple of wrinkles in his pants. The color choices here are awesome. There's a lot of contrast here. Like the metallic green of the armor provides great contrast against, it's like a slightly more muted, darker green. And then the color on the sleeves and the coat, they're not perfect match, but they're close enough. The pants, kind of like a very, very dark, muted gray, almost leaning on black. You have some of that gold, yellow piping around his shins. It's a great figure. Let's take a look at Kid Loki now. So here's Kid Loki, and I love this figure. It looks like it came straight out of the comic books. The last time I saw Kid Loki in the comics, or at least the comics I was reading, was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. There was a book called As Guardians of the Galaxy. And in that book, Thor and Loki's half-sister Angela, who was actually a comic book character created by Neil Gaiman for the comic book Spawn. Now, there's a weird history there. You might want to look into that. So there was a character that was introduced in the Spawn comic books, and that was a character named Angela. And I think there was some sort of weird dispute over who had the rights to the character. I think McFarlane and Neil Gaiman were going at it on who had rights to that character. But for whatever reason, at some point in time, Marvel obtained the rights to Angela, and they incorporated her into the Marvel Universe. And then when they did, they kind of revealed that she was Thor and Loki's half-sister. And a couple of years ago, they gave her her own comic book. It's called As Guardians of the Galaxy. And as the title infers, most of the characters were as guardians. You had Angela, you had that Thor frog, you had Scourge, and you had Kid Loki. But Kid Loki was disguised in destroyer armor. And I think that wasn't revealed until maybe the second or third issue. But this Kid Loki is awesome. It's not articulated. You're just getting essentially a small statue. And it's, this is really strictly more of a display piece. But it complements Loki well, especially this version of Loki. Because in the comic books, there was some weird story that just gave me a real headache. I couldn't figure... I was trying to find the issues and to make sense of it. And I'm sure I could have just looked it up on Wikipedia, but I'm too lazy. So from what I remember, there was Kid Loki, and then he was with Thor. And I think when they were kids, Loki told Thor that... I think one of Kid Loki's biggest fears is that one day he'd become bad. And I think he made Thor promise him that if he ever became bad, that Thor would lay him down. And it's take him out. But in the comic book, I think there was something weird, not this Loki, but Loki when he's much old. It's kind of like the Loki, I think that if you're an old comic book reader, you'd be familiar with. It's old school Loki. When he looked like an old man, and he was really the trickster god. Not like the handsome Loki that everyone loves nowadays, but this is old man Loki, who's actually the OG Loki. So I think in the way this story goes, that OG Loki committed the biggest sin, and I think he went back in time, or he did something weird, and I think he killed Kid Loki. And then they introduced, I think, this version of Loki, or teenage Loki, or whatever, and I think he had to correct that. Because he kind of realized that he didn't want to grow up to be an asshole, like old man Loki. So he kind of tried to go onto a different path. If I remember correctly. The story really confused the hell out of me. But I think most comic book stories do. So here's Kid Loki. It's awesome. It's a great companion piece to even if you just collect Thor figures and you have a giant collection of as guardians, whether you have Thor, female Thor, or Odin, and all that. This is just a cool piece to have. You can easily fudge this into your Marvel Legends. It's a kid, so of course he's going to stand a little bit a little shorter. And speaking of Marvel Select and Marvel Legends, I actually have another Marvel Select figure to compare sizes to. So here's Marvel Select Ultimate Iron Man. And Iron Man, he's supposed to stand 7 feet, so this is going to, of course, be a taller figure. I have 2 Marvel Legend figures here to compare heights. I think this is Infinity War Captain America from the Marvel Legends line. And as you can see here, the Marvel Select stuff is a lot taller. And then here's the Marvel Legends Spider-Man. I believe this is based off of Ultimate Spider-Man, so it's Peter as a teenager. So of course this is going to be a short figure. But since this is a teenager, we compare him to Kid Loki, and as you can see, you can kind of fudge them together. So, and since we're on the subject of Loki, let's take a look at some of the Loki memories that I got. So here are two Loki comics. I mentioned this earlier. There was, this came out a couple years back. It's Loki, Agent of Asgard. This is issue number 1. And this was during the Marvel Now era. Marvel Now was kind of Marvel's attempt to bring their stories and characters into the more modern times. DC had their New 52 and their Rebirth. And for those that they kind of like, I don't want to say they retcon things, but they kind of like just started all over again, and it was annoying because all those, I don't know, years of history that the character has accumulated, they kind of threw it out the window. And just, I don't know, comic books for some reason they always want to try to make them things new and hip and real and up to date, but and they always seem like the nerdy kid in school, like who's always trying to appease the popular kids. That's what I always like DC and Marvel too. You know, they're like the nerdy girl or the nerdy boy that like kiss up to like the captain of the football team or the prom queen because they want to be accepted, and they'll ignore their friends and just sell them out and stuff. And I can't stand that. They always want to reset the comic books and the stories because they want to pull more people into like reading them and stuff. But they need to understand that, you know, people are going to be introduced to like their superheroes one way or the other and be married to that. Like for a lot of people, they're just married to the Avengers from the movies because that's what they know. You know, they're not going to pull them into the comic book shops just because, oh, I like the movies a lot. You might get some, but... And that pisses me off because, you know, if you're a long-time comic book reader, all of a sudden they reset your stories and your characters to, like, try to please people who've never read them before. And it's like, you know, I'm the long-term guy. I've been here for, like, 30 years. You know, don't reset the story just because you want to bring, like, new people in. You know, that's what the movies are for. You know, just keep them in the movies. But enough about me ranting like a crazy man. Let's talk about Loki. So here's Loki number 1, Agent of Asgard. And as you can see, this figure is clearly modeled after this more modern take on a younger Loki. And this was a good example of how the movies influenced the comic books. Tom Hiddleston, who plays Loki in the movies, is incredibly popular. I mean, they're giving him his own series. And people just love the charming, debonair, slick Loki. They don't like old man Loki. So, you know, in the comic books, they give us this. And, you know, this is just a great physical representation of this character. All the details are there. The scale mail, the coat, the sword, the shorter horns, the hairstyle. And then the comic starts off with Loki. You know, there you go. Him and Thor going at it. And then they talk about Loki. So this is comic book Loki. This is kind of his story, or at least this version's story from a few years ago. This is the story of Loki, adopted on the battlefield by Odin, king of Asgard. Loki was the foster brother of Thor. They didn't always get along. Admittingly, that was because Loki became involved in increasingly wicked schemes over the long centuries, until eventually he was known by all as the god of evil. And he was trapped by that definition, spiraling deeper into infamy with each new misdeed, unable to escape his role, unable to escape himself, doomed to never be anything but Loki, Loki the bad son, Loki the villain, until the day he died. So he died, which was of course his greatest scheme of all, for soon he was reborn into a new youthful body, free to choose his own fate. With the sword of Asgard's earliest hero in his hand and missions from the All-Mother, ruling triumphant of Asgardia to help polish his sparkling new reputation. So obviously, after all that, he wouldn't just stab his brother right in the back, surely. Yeah, so this is almost kind of like Loki redeemed in a weird way. It's kind of like him struggling to like not go down that path where he becomes like the evil asshole Loki. And then here, some beefcake shots of Loki in the shower. This was a weird comic. Like, he moved into, like, I think he, like, moved to Manhattan and had an apartment and a roommate. You know, there's Thor. They're always kind of going at it. Here's the Avengers. This is cool. It's a nice throwback to, like, you know, old school Avengers. And there's Old Man Loki. And this is during the Marvel Now era, so these were kind of like the Avengers updated looks. And I say this all the time. This is my favorite, one of my favorite versions of Iron Man. I love the black and gold. So it's cool. Let's take a look at, here's Old Man Loki. And then here's a look at Loki, Agent of Asgard. This is the 10th issue. And here we have Kid Loki on the front. As you can tell, this figure is based off of Kid Loki. And there's Loki's roommate. I can't remember her name. Yeah, Verity Willis. And she had a weird power. She's not a mutant or anything, but I think she was like... I want to say, I think she had this weird ability where she kind of just knows when people are lying. And I think that's why she got along so well with Loki. Because he's always spinning stuff and he's never telling the truth. But that's where she comes into play. And then there's shirtless Thor with his metal arm. And then there's another description of Loki, what's going on in his life. It gets, I don't know, it gets all kind of muddled and confusing. And then here's a scene with Kid Loki. Yeah, it says here, Thor, if I go bad, do it. Just do it. Promise me. So I think that's when Kid Loki knows at some point in time he's going to become an asshole and he wants his brother to kill him. So yeah, that's pretty much memories of Loki. I like this iteration of the character a lot. Partially because, I mean, I think it's one of the things they did right. Even though the character's history is kind of confusing, it's just a great way of modernizing the character. Especially, you know, there's no ignoring the fact that people love the Marvel Cinematic Universe version of the character. Tom Hiddleston does a great job playing the character. You know, he really brings a lot of charm and depth to a villain that, you know, you just kind of you kind of like fall for the villain. He's very likable. It's kind of like how, you know, they did a great job of making Baron Zemo like one of the stars in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And it's the same with Loki in the movies. He takes a character that's been a villain for like decades, and then you just cast the right actor, you know, and give him the right scenes, and all of a sudden you just fall in love with him. And I think they just really wanted to bring that kind of charm into the comic books. And even though it's not a one-for-one, you know, copy of what you get in the movies, I think it was a nice way of them, you know, reinterpreting the. I think it's just a nice way of them trying to reinterpret. I'm slipping over my words. I think it's just a good way of them this reimagining the character to fit in a more modern way. You know, that if you were familiar with the movies, you'd be drawn to it. But his story is confusing. But it's a nice visual character, though. And I like Kid Loki a lot. It's awesome. So if I had to rate this figure numerically, my first thought was a 9. 9's being a little bit too generous. I think I'd give it a 9 just because I love the character so much. But I'd probably get, you know, at the highest 8.5, the lowest an 8. I mean, in terms of a Marvel Select, it does everything it should do. There's not really anything I'd do to improve it. Oh my god, I forgot. I had these here. before I sign off, let's take a look real quick at. I actually had normal Marvel Legends Lokis next to me. So this is Loki from, I believe, Thor Ragnarok, and this is Loki from Infinity War. This was with the 2-pack, I think, that came with Corvus Glaive, and they're essentially the same figure. The only thing different is that they're, repaints. And this one has the helm with the horns. My horns came off, so I had to like re-glue them with super glue. And I wasn't sure if it's the way they were assembled before, but I kind of swapped out where they were. And when I did, the horns kind of swept in a wider arc, and then they kind of pointed in, and I think it just looked better. Because before, the horns would just sweep up, and I kind of like how these sweep out. It looks more dramatic. And then here, this has a likeness of Tom Hiddleston, who we all know at one time dated Taylor Swift, and the relationship was serious enough that he introduced Taylor Swift to his mom, and I don't know why they broke up. I think it's Taylor's loss. And I don't know, I like this figure a lot. It just bothers me because his belt looks very high-waisted, so he looks like an old man. But the likeness is there, and it's a great figure. So, do I recommend this? Hells yeah, this is an amazing figure. If you're a fan of Loki, buy it. If you're not very fond of the comic book Marvel Legends Loki that they just released, where it's the old man kind of Loki, and the scale mail on him is painted, not sculpted, definitely get this. This is a wonderful figure. I don't think it'll disappoint you in any way. And just getting Kid Loki is a big plus. This is awesome, especially if you read the comic books and you really want to kind of expand your Asgardian universe. You need this. So once again, my name is Lou. This was a longer video, but I appreciate you hanging out with me. Feel free to stop by anytime, and take care.